Hey Beach, it's Pastor Jerry and myself here with you. If you remember back in January, we started the One series, and 1 week into the One series, we called an audible, and we said that God was birthing a brand new vision in us for the life of our church, and we would be back to you when we had some more details and we could more clearly communicate with you what God was doing in our life and in the life of this church. And so here we are, hoping to be able to explain some of the things that God has put on our hearts for our church. And so Pastor Jerry is going to tell us some of those things.
Well, Beach has always been a place of spiritual birth. It's been a place where we have sought to not be complacent about the call of God upon our lives, to lead people to a growing relationship to Jesus Christ. Every time God has given us opportunities, we have sought to be obedient and to come to a crossroad and take steps to follow after God. Some of the different things that we've experienced over the past few years, many of you might remember that about 14 years ago we started a contemporary worship service with drums and guitars at a time when no one was really was even aware of what contemporary worship was. And eventually God led hundreds more people here into the life of our church. We also started a South Campus down in Ponte Vedra back in the year 2000, and we renovated an entire office complex, and we sent some of our best leaders down there to branch out and to multiply our efforts at reaching people for Christ. A few years ago, when we were in the design phase of the Family Life Center, it was scheduled and set up to be an activity center, and right in the middle of that design phase, we decided to revision that place for a worship center. We were already packed out in worship, and so we decided to make that into a worship space. And I remember when people actually said that they didn't think we could fill it, and we see what God has done up to this point. We also partnered with Faithful Servant Missions a couple of years ago in order to start a new church in Costa Rica for Nicaraguan refugees. We bought the post office a few years ago. And we bought the post office, we had to basically pay mortgage payments on it for 5 years before we could even use it for parking and other things. And then finally, just a couple of years ago, we were involved in looking at starting a new church in Nocatee. And about that time, we sensed that God was calling us to really maximize our facilities here. And so we began a new service that would target the 18 to 30-year-old culture here in this community that many churches weren't reaching. And so that was the beginning of the birth of 1122. God has done tremendous things to bring new people to Christ, and hundreds of people are coming into the life of this church and giving their hearts to Christ. And in the midst of that, we've come to a new crossroads. And we believe that God is birthing in us a much greater vision to have a broader impact for the kingdom of God. And the first step to that much broader impact will be the start of the Church of 1122, a non-denominational church strategically located in the Jacksonville community with Joby Martin as the lead pastor of the church. We believe that this will be God's greatest plan for us as we move toward the future. And we just want to take a few moments to tell you a little bit about how we got here. First of all, it was just phenomenal growth. We have used up all of our parking space. We have also maximized all of our worship facility space in order to make room for as many people as possible. So as we began to look at this, we decided, would we rather start a few more services and reach hundreds, or would we rather multiply and launch a church in order to reach thousands? And so it became very clear to us, just upon that alone, that we wanted to strategically launch a church. The second reason that we started to move in this direction was the issue of leadership. Many of you know that I'm a pastor at heart. I'm a cultivator. I've always loved and believe that God has used me to basically gather around myself a high impact group of quality leaders and then to pour into them and cultivate and then release them to do what God has gifted them to do. And I think we've built a phenomenal team here at Beach through the years. And one of those high impact players has been Joby Martin. And one of the things that I believe strongly in is that God put us in a season of ministry together so that we could have a significant influence on each other's lives. And one of the things that I feel like God has positioned me to do is to have the opportunity to release Joby to be able to do some of the things that God has gifted him to do. I truly believe that he is gifted to be a lead pastor of his own church. And so one of my greatest honors is to have this kind of opportunity. And as we began to look at the picture of leadership here at Beach, it was about that time that I was taking a sabbatical, a time away from the church. And as I began to pray about what God was calling me to do, God reaffirmed my call as the senior pastor here at Beach. And as he began to reaffirm that calling in me, it really led me to start thinking a lot more about Joby's role in the life of the church. Up to this time, he's taken a significant role as the teaching pastor, the primary teaching pastor of 1122. And he has also been the executive pastor of Beach and has done a phenomenal job. And as he has been doing this, one of the things that really became apparent was that as a United Methodist Church, Joby's role pretty much had reached about as far as he could go as a leader here at Beach. So as I began to take all that into consideration, it really became apparent to me. And I went to Joby one day and just said, I think it's time that you led your own church. And so ever since then, I felt just a great sense of joy and feel a great honor to be able to be a part of something that God is doing, a movement here that God is doing to release people for ministry and to see a far greater impact for Christ in our community.
And so while Jerry felt a great joy, I kind of felt like I was going to throw up. I mean, I just feel like, wow, that God is calling me to be a lead pastor of a church. And I think that what the Lord has done is use the circumstances here at Beach to nudge me to some areas of surrender that I would not have volunteered for. But what I want you to know are a few things. One is that Gretchen and I love Beach, and this is our home church, and the best years of our lives have been spent right here at Beach. I mean, both of our kids were born here. Our friends are here. It really is our family, and so we love this church. The other thing that I need everybody to know is that I will forever be indebted to my friend and senior pastor, Jerry Sweat, because this man gave me opportunities to do ministry that no one else would give me. And so I believe that God brought me under his authority in his ministry for a season to be cultivated and grown up to get to the place where I was ready to be the lead pastor of the church. And then what we hope that is very clear to everyone is that, like we said, I think God's called me to be the lead pastor, but God has also reaffirmed Jerry's calling to be a senior pastor of this church. And what we are doing is just trying to be obedient to God's call on our life, and we want our entire church, all of Beach United Methodist Church, to have that same freedom to be obedient to God's call on all of our lives, and that we would work together, be fueled by love, so that we could launch a new church, the Church of 1122, and then we would have two God-honoring churches that are fueled by love. Now there's probably some details, some questions that you have. So Jerry, why don't you try to answer some of those questions?
Yeah, just a few things that you might want to keep in mind. First of all, if you're thinking about the time frame in which this launch would occur, think months and not days, possibly up to a year or more. We're looking to launch this church in a healthy way, and so we want to make sure that we don't allow the calendar to dictate the vision of two healthy, God-honoring churches in this community. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. Also, we want to let you know that the first phase, beyond just communicating this new vision, will be to go through a season of just getting informed. We're starting to build some teams here. Our leadership board has approved this launch. and they have designated a launch team made up of staff and lay people who will be a part of working out the nuts and bolts with regard to the launch. In the meantime, we're keeping our focus on the prize. We're keeping our focus on leading people to a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's our prayer that God will guide us and lead us through this process, and we will continue to communicate with our church family all along the way as God is leading us.
In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus gathers his disciples together on this rock, and they're overlooking this pagan ritual area in an area called Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they give him all kind of politically correct type answers. And then Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus stops everything, and it's the first time the church is ever mentioned. And he says, "Upon this rock I will build my ecclesia," is the Greek word that he uses. And that word literally means movement. Now, my experience over the past 7.5 years here at Beach, at this local church, is that God has initiated a movement and the walls cannot contain it. And so we just want to be a part of what God has been doing for 2,000 years. And the vision of the church is not new, it's just our turn. And we just want to say to you, thank you so much for allowing us and trusting us to be the leaders that God would choose to use in this movement. And we hope that you will continue to pray for us as we continue to seek God's wisdom and guidance as we move forward in a church, a prevailing church that will be exactly what Jesus called us to be a couple of thousand years ago. So thank you.